Dani.
Hi.
Hi. Oh.
Sorry, I'm trying to fix it. I was like, where's the comments? I don't have the comments up.
Oh, yeah. We need the chat. Hello, everybody.
Hello. Good morning. Good morning. We already here with our hot tea. Oh, yeah. I got some cold tea this morning.
No. We're so happy to have Stephen here with us. Cannot wait to start chit-chatting. Thank you for agreeing to come on here and hang.
Pleasure.
I know. Good morning, everybody. Hi. Y'all, we are super excited today because we are going to be talking about intuitive reading.
That's right.
So something not different, but kind of different, right? I mean, a lot of times we talk about, the structure of tarot and the meaning of this, the meaning of that. But a lot of people don't talk about like how we read intuitively and what that means and looks like. So we kind of wanted to chat with Stephen about that today.
We're stoked.
So excited.
Great to be here. It really is.
Yeah.
I've watched you both, so in the past, obviously. So it's lovely to be here.
Yeah, it's really fun. Stephen, you and I were talking like, gosh, when was that? Like almost 2 months ago, I feel like now. It's been a little bit. But we were talking about the way that the approach completely changes when you take all like the rules off and you just start like looking at everything and how it connects in an organic way, like looking at the images and seeing what they tell you about each other. And what fascinated me is you were doing that, if I remember correctly, with like Marseille style decks even. Can you tell us a little bit about that and like how that was the place you went with intuitive reading?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think to intuitively read with the Marseille is quite a common thing. I mean, there's been books written about it. The main one I can think of is by Yoav Ben Dov, which is all about the open reading. And that is about, I mean, really, if we think back, it's probably how people potentially read hundreds of years ago, was to look at the images and think about where is somebody looking? Are they greeting someone, or are they looking away from somebody? Are they excited to see them? Are they not excited to see them? Are they gifting something? Are they receiving? Are they running towards something or running away? All of these kind of things can really dramatically alter an interpretation just by where a card falls. So each time that you're reading a card, you're not so much relying on default meanings. You're kind of really just getting involved with what the picture's saying. And what I really liked about that is I kind of felt like I was actually reading the cards rather than just kind of, I don't want to say regurgitating, even though I just said
but yeah, that's what it feels like, though. You're absolutely right.
Meanings, where I'm reading the cards in a different way each time, and that to me felt really exciting. But I realized that wasn't something that was new to me. I kind of was doing this over the years with all different kinds of decks, different oracles, different tarot decks. So
I love that. I think it'd be good if we all chatted for a brief second about, I guess, kind of how we conceptualize, because this is where we all get, I think, stuck in our language, like how we conceptualize what do you mean when you say, like, I feel like I'm starting to get a grasp of where you're at, Stephen, but I'd love more. And like, where, I guess, how you think of intuitive reading, what it means to you, how we would define it, maybe, is a better way to ask the question. So I don't know who wants to jump in, you or Dani. It doesn't matter. I'll share.
I think there's different levels of intuitive reading. And I think the way that I work with Marseille is very much based on that open reading. So when I look at the high priestess, let's say, I'm not looking at the high priestess. I'm looking at somebody who's sitting on a chair, pointing in a direction, holding something specific. And the same with other cards. I'm looking at them completely as if I've never looked at a tarot deck before. But I think there's also times when you could class intuitive reading as you pull two cards and you have two meanings and you allow them to jump into something completely different.
Like math.
And I'm thinking now here oracle cards with, a set keyword. So you might have, I don't know, distance, and you might have release. So, then you take those two words and you just use them as a springboard to something completely different. So I think there's different levels of intuitive reading.
Agree. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. For me, I guess for me, when it comes to the intuitive reading, I guess I mix this with kind of the energy that like for me, it has a lot to do with the energy that surrounds whatever I'm doing and the reading and what's going on. And very much like you said, it's one of those things where, in a way, I have my tarot reader brain on that says these, you know, like you said, like this is the high priestess. This is kind of what she means. But then it's like you have to take in the whole scope. For me, intuitive reading is really looking at the whole scope of things, not just this card in this placement. It's like, what are the connotations of that? Like you said, where is she sitting? Where is she looking? Does this thing in her hand really pull to me, or am I ignoring it completely? What around it? And then whoever is in front of me, it's like what those energies are pulling towards. For me, there's a bit of a woo in there, if you will, I guess, that comes with it. For me, it's pulling that energy and reading that energy along with the cards, but using them as a springboard to kind of bring another person in and say, do you see what's happening here? You know, this person is looking in this direction. You're being pulled forward, or maybe you're looking too much backwards. Everybody's looking backwards. What's in the past that's that's pulling you there.
Yeah.
So really encompassing not only the meaning of the card, but what it looks like, what's it in relativity to on the table and to the person in front of you. You know, there's just like, it builds for me.
Yeah, it's layers kind of, right?
Yeah, it's layers for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny for me. I have a hard time like conceptualize, like really giving it like a strict definition, because so much of it for me, I was just having like in my brain, I just went to like this really geeky place with it. But like there's this theory in quantum physics about how a particle behaves and how a wave behaves and how they behave differently depending on whether they're being observed. I don't know if y'all have heard that. But
yes.
What I think, I don't know why this is where my brain went, but this is also kind of how intuitive reading works for me. But like, I went to this analogy of like reading in a rote way, or reading in a, I guess, a cerebral intellectual way, or a, like Stephen said, it can almost sometimes feel like we're regurgitating, like what we just know about the card. That sort of feels like a fixed place in time, like a fixed understanding of the cards. Whereas to me, I feel like intuitive reading feels like we're riding a wave. We're kind of going on a journey. It's explorative. It's like the difference between playing a I don't know why I go to analogies all the time, but playing like a sandbox, like a game like Mario, where you're like running along this like one-dimensional world, and like a sandbox game like Legend of Zelda, or you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Like I keep thinking about the ways in which one feels like it's very it's on a linear path, and one feels like it flows. And like both of you, I feel like I'm very much kind of zooming out a little bit and looking at, where are people looking? How are the characters interacting? Does a particular symbol or character jump out more than others? Is one of them seeming really loud on the table, and the other one seem like sort of like they're surrendering their energy to it? And trying to define and describe that can be really challenging. But I think it opens up so much possibility and excitement in just working with the cards, because you're letting them lead you, as opposed to you sort of forcing them into like a path or a strict definition.
Or a box, really, especially now with like where we are in kind of I don't know, it almost feels like the tarot renaissance, where we're having so many different images and representations and styles and artwork. It's like there's so much to look at, and I feel like each one can bring something completely different, hence the reason a lot of us have so many decks, because of just that excitement, especially for me as an intuitive reader. It's one of those things where I can follow that vibe, I can follow that energy, and then expand upon it in that way. And I just find that really exciting.
It's super exciting. I'm curious. So, Stephen, when you're reading with a Marseille, this is coming from me, I'm not familiar with Yoav Vendov's open reading, but I've heard about it. But I guess my question would be, I know that you have in the past worked with, say, majors only Marseille. Do you also work with the pips in this intuitive way? And if so, what does that look like when you pull up a card that's like the 2 of Wands or the 7 of Cups or something? How do you pull that in intuitively, or does it feel different? I guess is kind of my question.
I mean, personally, I prefer to work with the majors only when I'm working with the Marseille.
Yeah.
But there are, you know, in a book that I'm actually in the process of writing, editing at the moment, I go through a lot of different ways of working with the pips. So
Yeah.
it could be the whole looking at the numerology in conjunction with the elements, or it could be that we just, you know, we just look at those pictures and we once again just say what you see. You know, that you might see some flowers that have been separated, or you might see that there are coins in little different sections. You know, what might that mean? So you really, I think one of the things you have to do is you just have to give yourself the permission to just kind of go rogue.
Yes.
So a thing. Yeah.
And that's so hard, I think, these days.
It really is.
And there's how to do it, and you know.
Well, and I know that sometimes people bump up against this, and I've talked about this because I read playing cards as well. Some people bump up against this. It's like, well, I don't want to be wrong. What if somebody says it doesn't mean that? And it's like, that's not a thing though. Like in the context of a reading, it's all open. But like even in playing cards, I do the same thing. You know, there are some that are, you know, in a certain pattern, and it's like, oh, well, there's obviously an obstacle in the middle of your path.
Yeah.
You know, because you got two straight lines and then something dead in the center. It's going to be hard to get past it. It's like really looking at what you're being presented, even if it's just, you know, a bunch of quote unquote, a bunch of sticks. There's still something there to me. Like it's about how their knobs are, or maybe how they're resting, or what, like you said, what way they're pointing, maybe something separated. It's like, there's clues everywhere. And then you can also continue to add in, you know, your numerology and your elements and your this, that, and the other. But like, I think there's something to be said from just looking at what you're presented and allowing that to speak to you. But it's hard because a lot of people, again, it's like, there are no police now. And if somebody's like, I don't read it like that, it's like, well, I do.
Yeah.
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 You know,
I mean,
all about being observant. And
yeah.
I think, you know, if you see something in the cards that makes some sense for you, then it's relevant. And I think one of the things which I found really interesting about it is that you don't always need to go that deep. You might just notice that you've got 3 cards and a bunch of sticks turns into a bunch of cups, and it turns into a bunch of sticks again. And that could be your interpretation. Things are going to be so good, they're going to change, but they're going to change right back again. You know, something like that. You know,
absolutely.
There's your interpretation.
Yeah, I think there's like a misunderstanding that reading intuitively means we have to get really complex with it, and sometimes it does the exact opposite. Sometimes when you go off book or go rogue, as Stephen said, I love that because that's so true. When you give yourself permission to do that, you give yourself permission to not have to hit every single type of association with that card to get the meaning across. In fact, if anything, it pulls us back and allows us to simplify and distill the message into something useful and empowering for the client or whoever we're reading for, or ourselves even. I find it it creates a sense of freedom that allows us to lean more into self-trust and lean more into our interpretive ability and less leaning on just this is what it's supposed to mean. And I think when we do that, our readings just open up and become more expansive and more helpful. At least that's been my experience.
Yeah.
But totally.
It's such a wonderful experience because you see something almost as if you've never seen it before.
Yeah.
You know? And I have to say that the title Going Rogue, I'm claiming that for a future book.
Absolutely. I love
that's
it.
for Stephen.
Rogue. That's
yes. You've got this. So have you, when you're thinking about this idea of going rogue, do you have you given more thought to what helps you get from that place where you're reading in a more rote way, or you're reading in a more, I guess, traditional way or memorized way, or whatever you want to, however you want to describe that, to like being able to, what helps you get over that hump of like resistance?
I think some of it is just being around the tarot block a few times.
Yeah.
You know, as I look at it now and I think, you know, I'm a different reader now than I was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. I should really kind of set the scene. You know, when I started tarot, I found tarot in a supermarket by chance in North London. I'd actually gone out to buy food for dinner because people were coming over, and I just happened upon a deck.
Yeah.
And after maybe, I don't know, a couple of weeks of having it, I spoke to somebody at another friend's house, And she knew about tarot. I didn't really know anything about tarot, but she knew a little bit. And she said, you've got to go and buy a deck which is right for you. So we went off into central London, and I went through the photo albums like you used to in the 90s, and they used to have like the little sample cards, which was a great, wonderful experience. And I bought the Heroic Tarot. I didn't know that it was a Thoth clone. I didn't know anything. I didn't know what a Rider-Waite was or anything. And in those early days, we used to have people around for dinner, my partner and I, and we would have dinner, and then sometimes someone would say, oh, do me a reading. So I'd take them into the bedroom, and I had this big red bed, and I had all these lovely kind of light blue muslin from the windows and the trinkety thing. It was lovely. And I used to take cards out with their beautiful starry backs.
Oh my God.
And I didn't completely know what I was doing. So I had a little idea about what some of the cards meant, but a lot of it I was winging.
Yeah.
And I look back at that time, and I still think it was some of the most magical tarot readings I ever gave.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you fast forward to forums and social media, and you can't do it this way. You've got to do this. You've got to start with that deck. And you kind of get very sucked into that. And, and I said it myself a lot of the times, start with this deck. This will be the best one for you to work with. But I think once you've kind of gone round that cycle a few times, you then think, well, hang on a minute. I quite liked that magic that I started with in the beginning. So maybe I can, I would always say to people, if you're going to buy a tarot deck, read the book, respect the fact that someone put this together and why they did it. But then after a while, go rogue, go off the route a little bit and make it your own. It doesn't mean that you have to completely ignore what you've learned.
No.
But I think you need to kind of give your permission to be able to personalize what you're doing.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I'm at now. It's kind of, I learned my stuff. I've read a lot of books. I've witnessed a lot of tarot stuff. And now I'm kind of looking at and thinking that those intuitive hits that I'm having are as relevant as those things that I've learned in books and courses and all the rest of it. So that's kind of where I am. I think it kind of takes a little bit of trying it all out first. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
absolutely.
I definitely think that helps. I'm also one of those people who, like you said, like I'll read the book and then I'm like, okay, done with that. Mm-hmm. Like, I feel like that's where people say like, getting to know your decks or whatever, not even in a personifying way. This is how you learn how to read, like you said, like free.
Yeah.
Getting the knowledge and then allowing the cards to speak to you. And that's why a big part of, a lot of times when I get a deck, like I won't even look at the guidebook yet. I will literally pull it out,
use it first,
and I just start flipping through. I find things that are intriguing. I look at them for a little while, and then I'll go back and read it because I want that initial hit
to be yours, right?
To be mine.
Yeah.
Even I did a little study of a card. I do that every once in a while where I I'll shuffle the deck, pick a card, and whatever card it is, I'll do a little study on it where I'll read a bunch of stuff. Well, I did that, and then I created a card, right? And I found that a lot of the times I'll get these like journal prompts or things, and I'm like, well, I don't want to read about this card because obviously I pull it. I know at first glance what it is, traditional meaning, yada, yada. Yeah. But I'm like, whatever deck it is, I like to sit with that image and then like throw everything I know kind of out the window.
Yes.
Sit with what I'm seeing. And then think about things like looking at this image, what quote would I use for this? Yeah. Or maybe which song does this remind me of? And kind of associate it with that. And then like, what do I feel when I just look at this particular image? Not this image in a traditional sense or this, that, and the other, like literally whatever deck I have, what is this card, this image saying? Yeah. Sitting with those things first. And then I come in and add the academic side where like, I'm reading what other people are saying about this. I'm reading about what the traditional symbolism is, possibly the symbolism on the card from the creator, you know, on this card specifically, and then kind of expand upon that. And I do that just as like a fun little intuitive exercise, because I feel like it's important to get to know not only, you know, in, you know, this case, I'll say, you know, I looked at judgment, not only to know what judgment means in general and like get a very solid understanding, but to know what it feels like to me.
Yeah.
In particular, especially when using this deck, this image, what does it feel like right here to me?
Yeah. Like,
and I just think that just, it's like it gives it something substantial, and it really puts you in control of reading that card.
Yeah.
You know, is there anything that you do, Stephen, that kind of like gets you to play around with your intuition like that? Like, do you do any kind of little practices at all?
I think, yeah, I mean, I like to play around with cards, and I think I especially like to move them around so I can see how they look in different sequences. And I think that's very much part of that whole open reading thing as well, because you don't just look at one card in isolation. You look at maybe 3 cards and think of them in almost like a diorama. So you've got this big picture. It's like, you know, you almost like let the borders of the cards just disintegrate, and you know what's going on if this was a full picture, and you'll just be amazed by how sometimes it looks like actually landscapes are coming together. And I'll be honest, I think that there are some decks that are better for this than others.
Definitely.
I mean, one of the things I've recently started doing, and one of the things I quite like to teach actually, is to work with this open reading idea, but not the Marseille, but the Rider-Waite, because the Rider-Waite does have a lot of movement in it. People are really rushing off in different kind of directions. You know, they've got expressions, you know, the things that repeat. I think that repeating is another thing in terms of Marseille that you can use. So you might look and see, you know, say you had a question that's just a silly question like, how's this rash on my hand going? You know, you might have 6 of wands, 4 of cups, 2 of batons, you know, and you could just look at it and say, well, those numbers are reducing. It's gonna fade eventually, and you could look at the numbers and see if it's a quick decline or if it's a slow decline, depending on what those numbers are and how much space there is between them. But yeah, you know, you could kind of look at it and see that there's maybe a couple of cups in one card, and then in the next card you see 2 dogs like the moon, and then maybe you see the 2 cups of temperance, and you can kind of intuit what that means. You know, what does it mean when 2 wild dogs turn to 2 cups that are being held and controlled in that way? Does that have some kind of relevance to your question or the situation? And if you're reading for someone, you can ask them, you can show them the pictures and say, you know, what does that mean to you?
What jumps out at you? It becomes then an interactive sort of experience with whoever you're reading with. We got a couple questions, so I wanted to throw a couple out there. One of them by Melissa DeVries. Do you ever find yourself hyper focused on one part of a card or just one card in a reading? And if so, how do you move on from that?
I mean, I think that when you do become really focused on something, it obviously has some kind of real importance, and there's something there that needs to be addressed. I think it's important sometimes, though, not to get too caught up on it. I kind of almost like to put cards aside a little bit and say, I'll come back to you. One of the other things I think is also important when you have quite a few cards out is that maybe not every single card in the reading needs to even be read.
That's true.
You know,
that is very true.
If you're looking at a selection of cards and you're really focused on that one, maybe the key to your reading is right there, and it's something really simplistic right under your nose. And maybe there's other 4 cards. Well, maybe there's something to come back to another time.
That's really good advice. It's funny when I see this question, the first thing I think of, Dani, is that day we were talking about the Druidcraft and the 5 of Wands. And there's a chicken in the card, and like how your eye goes, and you might be like, why is this this chicken might represent somebody staying outside of the drama or whatever. And I think my opinion is like, if something's jumping out and it seems really loud in a reading, so similar to Stephen, I feel like that there's a reason that's catching your attention. And it's one of the first ways and the easiest ways I feel like I began intuitive reading was just simply in a reading, noticing when something seems like it has a bigger importance than it does in the image. Like, oh,
Yes.
why am I super fixated on the dog in the Fool card and not the main character of the card? Why is it the dog that I'm honing in on? And then my reading begins to sort of move in that direction. Like, who's the dog in your life in this situation? Who is trying to guide you or warn you or whatever? Like, who is that? And that's one example of that same kind of thing. But I started doing that more after, Dani, you talked about the rooster, 5 of Wands. And it's funny how these things that we hear become sort of, they kind of come in and they sit with us and they shift and change the way that we work with the cards.
Yes.
But I think I'm with you, Stephen. I think if you've got a group of cards on the table and one seems like really loud and you're having a hard time moving on from that, it's probably for a purpose. Like, there's probably a reason that seems so significant. And maybe
Right.
that's the point. Maybe we don't need to give as much attention to everything else on the table at that point.
I agree, because there are times where like I'll be reading and I'm like, I can't, like, I feel like I cannot move on here. I'm
Yeah.
like, so what we're going to do is I want to take a look back at this, right? Like,
Yeah.
so I want to take a step back. And it's like, if I'm on this and it is just not letting go, it's like, okay, let's see what else is around it, you know? And I
Yeah.
really love how you said, when you were talking about how, you know, putting a card through its paces and looking at it in different situations with other cards around it. I think that's so genius. Like, and I never really thought about that before. Like, what, you know, now I've read, you know, many of my books are like, oh, well, how it relates to these other trumps, or, you know, these of the minor arcana, or whatever it is. You know, I think about it in context with that, and I read in, you know, in context of where it is and how it's interacting with the other cards.
Yeah.
But I really do like that concept of, like, when you're studying a card, put it in a few situations, because again, different styles of reading, playing card readings, like, it matters what's around it. Like, it matters, and it changes the entire meaning. Where one card could literally mean death, in another place could mean your marriage. Like, so you have to have context.
Yeah.
So I just think that's really neat. And I often forget it when I'm dealing with tarot, because I'm like, I understand the context when I'm in my reading, but when I'm studying, it's not something I'm like, let me get the context, because I'm like, oh, it's not a playing card. I don't need as much context, but that really does add a lot.
It does. It's like the difference between, like, we don't read cards in singularity very often, but we study them in singularity. So, which is interesting, right? So if we shift that and we shake that up, then what changes? I think we had another question as well. Michelle asked, do you ever do readings where you lay out the cards face down first and then turn them over one by one? And if so, how does that affect your intuitive approach?
I have done readings like that. I think, you know, when I was younger, I started off doing readings like that.
Yeah.
And then you're building up that story as you go along. Yeah. But generally, I do prefer to have them all turned at the same time, because then I can really look at those different similarities. You know, how does this card in the past here, how is it similar to what's going on in the future, or how is it different? Why might that be? What's in the present which could affect that? So I prefer to kind of get an idea of the whole story, you know. And I know, as I said, you know, you don't have to concentrate on every single little bit of it. I think one of the great things about a spread like the Celtic Cross is that there's so much going on there. But if you've got a specific area of interest, you can go straight to that place.
Yes.
Is just there, you know. You want to look at the environment, or maybe, you know, what is the underlying issue here? Well, let's go and look at card 3, card 3. You know, let's look at the column. So but that's just me. And you know, everything I'm saying here about reading intuitively as opposed to default meanings, you know, we're all different for some people. And even in some readings, I'll do readings that are default readings, but then when I'm confronted with something where I kind of look at it and think, oh my God, look at that person pointing at that other person, isn't it so obvious in the reading? Then I go there, you know, and other stuff just kind of
That's an interesting point, because I think about part of the intuitive process, at least for me, is knowing is paying attention to where the reading leads you, like I said, instead of like trying to lead it in a way. And that's what you said about the Celtic cross caught my attention on the whole face down thing. I stopped doing that a long time ago also, because I want the whole context. I want to be able to jump and flow where I want to go. I used to do that a long time ago, and it helped me to focus, I would say, when I was, like you said, trying to build the story. But now it's funny that you brought that up, because when I read the Celtic cross, I don't always read it in order. Like, I don't always read card 1 and 2 first. You know, it just depends on what's coming through in that moment. And I think when everything's face up, there's a few things I just now do as automatically, which is part of, I think, the intuitive process for me, where I look at first glance, do I see something dominating, or do I see something completely missing? Is there a lot of wands or fire on the table? Is there no fire on the table? Especially like if I'm doing a relationship reading, I immediately notice where's the cups, where's the wands, and when those things are absent or dominant, what does that say about that relationship and where we're at right now? I can't do that if I'm flipping over one at a time. I'm going to miss that layer. And so I stopped doing the face down thing a long time ago because of that. So I would say for me, it would interfere with my ability to read intuitively if I have to like do them one at a time, you know?
I think so. In what you were saying there about the different elements, this is one of the things I used to teach when I was teaching Celtic Cross, was that sometimes you could just look at the elements in a reading and give a perfectly amazing reading without even digging into what each card means.
Yep.
But I was also just thinking there as well that this idea of turning them on at a time, sometimes I've done the reverse, where I've had all of the cards out and somebody has asked a question and I've got to the point where I'm like, do you know what? I think that what's important is these 4 cards. So let's turn all the other ones over and just go there. You know,
yes.
Distracted. You want to know what's going to happen in the future? Well, let's look at card 7, cards 9, and cards 10, perhaps, because that's where we're going.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. I love that.
The only time I really default to having cards turned over are usually year aheads, because I don't want to see the whole. It's so big of a reading
that it's distracting.
I don't want to see everything at once. I go 6 months at a time. Yeah. Each month has a couple of cards in there. Yeah. So I will turn over those 3 or 4 cards, talk about this, then move on. Still, though, I reference back.
Yeah.
But because this type of reading is about a linear timeline, it makes sense to go one by one and then look back, because that's how you're going to be doing. You're going to look back.
Yeah, that's true.
While looking for, so it's like, that's the only time I really have them flipped, if I'm being honest.
It's funny when you say that, because I'm like, actually, the way that I did my monthly tarot readings this year was I did that envelope thing. So if you don't know this, Stephen, what I did is I took some decks, I picked them, I shuffled, I did a reading for myself essentially for every month of the year, but I dealt all the cards out face down and put them into an envelope, sealed it with a wax seal, put a date on it, put it away. And then I open those envelopes every month and I sort of take it in. And I did the same thing with the full moon. So I have a full moon reading and a month reading that I basically did way at the beginning of the year. And it's been really magical that time, because then I'm not doing this thing where I'm anticipating, oh shoot, September's going to be a tower month. Like, oh crap. And then I'm not manifesting or looking for trouble. It's like you look for trouble, you'll find it kind of thing. And I think sometimes in especially predictive readings, we'll do that to ourselves a little bit. Like, so that's kind of a big picture equivalent of keeping them face down until it's time to deal with them, so that I'm taking them in that time period and not elsewise. So I guess I was, fibbing a little bit. I guess I do that a little bit, but that's the context. And it's been really valuable in that scenario.
Yeah. And that's what I mean. So that context,
Yeah. Yeah. What was that, Stephen?
I said, I bet you get a lot of wow moments when you're opening
those. Yeah, especially because depending on when I open it in the month, it's really wild. Like I've had a couple times where I've opened it like mid-month and I'm like, whoa, it's really cool. It's really cool. And it brings a little bit of the magic back for myself, I think, which is also really nice. Like just some of that mystery, to kind of bring that back in is really great. Yeah.
I mean, one of the things, that you and I, Lisa, have spoken about privately was this whole feeling of tarot burnout and just kind of getting to a point where it became almost mundane. And I think if you can kind of find these things which kind of real pump up your practice again, like the envelopes, or like finding a completely different way of reading, you can really start to light those fires again, you know. It just takes a bit of imagination, I think, and a little bit of trying out new stuff.
It's adding excitement. And Lisa and I have been talking about this a lot, you know, even with some of our other friends as well. Oh my God, that cup. Obsessed.
Wait, I didn't see it. Oh my God. I love it so much.
But like right now, it's like I'm in a place where I want to, like, when I'm not reading for someone or for myself, I want to play. I want to find those new ways. I want something exciting because looking at it, thinking in the same context over and over and over again just ain't it. Especially not after doing it for years upon years upon years upon years. You know, it's like, where do I find the excitement in this practice? Because I know that there's that magic there. I know there's that excitement, that spark of joy. There's a reason why we come back to it every single time. So where is it at? And it's like just trying to find ways to play. In whatever way that looks like, whether that be like creating something or, you know, can you have somebody hold up some cards and see if you can psychically guess which card they're holding up? Like just playing just makes everything, I don't know, it just keeps it in your mind and exciting and keeps adding to me to those meanings. And when cards come up in a reading, you remember these like random situations and it's like, well, you know what? You know, it just brings in something extra. And I really love that.
Me too.
You know, one of the great things as well is to invite a child to come and read tarot with you and say, what does that mean? And they'll tell you and you'll go,
you're like, that's the most profound thing I've ever heard.
Like, wait, can you say that again? I'm going to write that down.
Make sure you've got a recorder of some kind. But
we have so much like baggage, really, if you think about it. We build up so much tarot baggage over the years. The longer you read, I feel like the more that builds up and it becomes a weight. And it's funny because one of the things that sort of brought some of the magic in reading back for me was not showing the cards until I've given my interpretation. And this is actually one of those things that is really useful when I read for my members, which I do every month. I'll lay the cards down and I'll give the full interpretation and I'll show the cards only at the end. And it's especially like freeing because I'm reading for people who are familiar with tarot, at least somewhat familiar with tarot. Some of them have been reading tarot for years and years and years. And the beauty of that when you're reading for somebody else is you don't always know what somebody else knows about the tarot. And it can become this thing in your head that's kind of like, are they going to understand? Like, is somebody else going to be sitting across the table going, that's wrong? Or are they going to take in the message first and weigh its merit on its own before they compare it with what they know about the tarot? And it's funny because I started doing that sort of organically. I would just lay the cards down, give my interpretation, and then start showing them. And then I went to a tarot conference, and I'm pretty sure it was in a talk by Barbara Moore and Charles Harrington. They were talking about liminal spaces, and I'm pretty sure, unless I'm mixing up the talk, I think that was it. But anyways, one of the things they suggested is holding the cards like you would in a playing card game and like interpreting, giving the message first before you show the cards. And the thing about that is I feel like it does, for those of us who get really boxed into what is right versus what is wrong when we're reading, it frees you of that a little bit. Because you're not tipping your hand just yet. You can kind of like, you can give whatever message feels right. And then if you want to justify it or explain how those cards got you there, you can. But I think sometimes we get locked in thinking we have to show our work. Like it's a math homework. And we have to explain how we got from point A to point B. And I think sometimes we need to like let ourselves not do that. We don't have to do that every time. And I think sometimes not doing that and not feeling like we have to do that lets us read more intuitively.
And in according to saying that, something that Stephen, you brought up just now is like, that's where, again, sometimes even the greatest readers will get stuck because it's like, oh, well, you're supposed to, quote unquote, read every card. Well, I am reading every card, but I don't have to stop and say this card, this card, this card. But we get so caught up in that because that's what people are expecting to see, that it's like, yes, it's this card and this card, but at the same time, it doesn't, these cards are together. So we're mushing them because there's not a separation. And when I have extra cards that come out and let's say I get like 3 of them. Oh, those are together. This is a mush up. This doesn't come separate, you know?
We can't unentangle them.
We can't take them apart, you know? it solidifies that message. But I think you're absolutely right when you say like people are expecting, or you're thinking that people want you to show your work.
Yeah.
And it really does, doing that and reading like that really does hinder.
Yeah.
I found myself doing that and be like, honestly, this card really just shows that there's fire right here. It's
That's all
literally
it's saying
here
right
for
now.
the element. Like, but I felt the need to have to explain that, you know, and it's like, that's where we definitely box ourselves in, and we have that kind of imposter syndrome in a way, or like what we have in our head, what it's supposed to look like. And it's like, but that's not really how they organically work. And it's not how they used to work, especially like nobody's going to go, you're going to go to a reader, you're going to sit there and you're going to say, yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. You know what I mean? Like it's not someone trying to pick it apart. And it's like, we often forget when people come and sit with us for a reading, most of the time, if they're sitting there to pick you apart, then why are you doing this reading in the first place?
Yeah. Most of them just want to use
read it better yourself. Do so. you know, you come into a reading and you think you can give the better reading, then do that.
Then do that. Yeah. Like not in a mean way, but it's true. It's like, if you're coming and sitting in front of me, especially if you've paid me, you know, like this is you wasting your own time and energy to pick this apart. So I think we worry a lot about things like that.
We let
when
it
it really, when we break it down, it just doesn't make sense.
It doesn't even matter at the end of the day. Yeah.
No, it doesn't.
No, it really doesn't. I mean, I think if you're educating people about reading cards, you know, if you're going to teach somebody on the Tarot de Marseille as an example, then I think it's relevant to say, well, I got to this interpretation by this. But I think if you're giving a reading to someone, aside from the fact that you're wasting a lot of that money that's spending minute by minute, you know, they come in there for your particular psychic, intuitive lens on what those cards are. And you know, that kind of has to be what it is, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. But like you said, that's a very valid point. This is definitely when people are coming to you for a reading. Now, if you are teaching, like we got to have, I mean, like,
you got to show your work.
You got to show your work. You got
Even
you got to make it right.
Explaining what we talked about, where you're like, you know what, this is what drew my eye, so this is why I went here. And I do that. I actually do. It's funny when I do my member readings, I'll do that method where like I don't show my work until I give the message. And then I might say, like, this card is where I got, when you heard me talking about this, I was referring to this, or the interplay between these two. And I'll do that because it's helpful, especially for people who are trying to learn how to read better or whatever. But yeah, I think there's a big difference there. Stephen, you said something earlier that I think we don't talk about enough, which is how we felt before we started really studying, like how we felt when we were first playing with cards, first playing with tarot, first reading for others, those first experiences, like, and I can't remember which one of you said, Dani or Stephen, one of you said the thing about like learning the book but then putting it aside. That was you, Stephen, right? About the and I think
I said look at it and then throw it out the window.
So like that's funny because my very first deck, I read the book once and I literally threw it in the trash. Like I talk about this a lot, but I really put it away because if I didn't know that I would ever learn to trust my own ability to read. I feel like I would have relied on it too much and then not learned to build that self-trust. It's not necessarily something I fully recommend all the time, but like it was helpful for me. And partly because it let me just trust the process in a more magical way, in a more just letting myself lean into these cards can answer my question. And if I operate from that belief, what are they saying? How are they answering the question? And I think we lose a little bit of the magic over time. We lose a little bit of that ability to see just how powerful they can be on their own. I think we lose that. We just kind of, not that we get jaded, but we just build up all this baggage, like I was saying, and then it just gets in our way.
Yeah. You know, when I had my tarot revival, I grabbed, and I talk about this deck all the time, I grabbed the Fairies Oracle by Brian Froud. Like, people love it or they hate it. I'm a lover because that is one deck that I did that with. I got it. I flipped through it. I read that thing cover to cover and then I put it down. And I'm not going to lie. There were some of them I had to stretch. I had to look. I had to see, what are they telling me? What's in this card? What image is popping out? It might not be the frog lady in the front. It might be the little sprite in the back.
Yeah.
You know, what are these words telling me? What does this look like? What does it feel like? Am I scared? Am I excited? You know, I really played with it, and I really, to me, that deck really opened up kind of my confidence when it came to that, because I had to sit with that, and I was bound and determined. I was like, no, I don't want to rely on this. I want to see it. I want to feel it. I want to know what it's talking about, you know, just intuitively. And it was years before I actually put the keywords and wrote them on the deck. And so I read them in a totally different way now, where I can put that down and I can say either what I'm feeling or the keywords that are on there. But like, I really sat with that because it wasn't a structured, you know.
No, I was gonna say that's like teaching yourself to read like that on hard mode, because the Fairies Oracle, it doesn't give you maybe as much in the interplay between characters as you might get in a different deck.
Exactly. So, you know, it was one of those things where I was like, I don't know why I was so obsessed with it, but like I'm thankful every day for it. You know what I mean? Because
like when you needed it.
I did. I was like, I want to connect and I want to trust myself.
Yeah.
You know, and it, like you said, it felt like it was on hard mode. And I would read for other people, and sometimes I was like, I am at a wall.
Yeah.
Right now. And I had to trust myself to be like, but what do you see?
Mm-hmm.
Not what are you reading on the card? Not what kind of like, you know, words is it saying? It might just say like the gray lady or whatever it is. You know, it's like, it's not about that. It's not about the character. What does she feel like? What does she look like? How does she, you know, like it really brought that out for me. Yeah. And it's like, I feel like in doing that, I approach the tarot that way. Because like the next deck I got was that Line Strider's Journey. And it's very different.
Yeah, that's way different.
Way different than, you know, our normal looking kind of RWS. And it's like, it literally brought me to a place where like I felt confident even in pulling a card that doesn't look like the normal, you know, thing. I felt more confident in being like, oh, but look at where this is and look at the colors here. And, you know, this represents fire, but there's also a lot of water. Why? You know?
You said something really profound that I think we don't talk about enough, which is that when we hit those walls, we've got two options, right? We can just like ignore it and just like move on really quickly, or we can like really dig into that discomfort. And one of the things I think that helps us grow as readers more than just about anything else is when we move, we slow down and we sit in that discomfort of like, I don't know what this means right now. And then like you let it like speak to you or let it unfold instead of feeling like we have to rush through or skip it, because it makes us feel self-conscious. We're like, I don't know what this means right now. But when we lean into that instead of running away from it, I think we really grow a lot as readers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things as well, you know, you might read this, but I think one of the great things about the Fairies Oracle is that book right from the very start through to the end is kind of find your own way.
Find your own way. Yes, it is.
But I think it's good sometimes, especially with oracles as well, that you can look in a book and it's okay to read something and think, I don't agree.
Yeah.
Yes.
I see that. Because sometimes I think we can get really held back and think, well, I don't quite see that in the card, so therefore I am wrong.
Yeah.
You have to kind of yourself. Many years ago, I went to a conference and I bought a deck by Stella Conway, and I cannot remember the name of it now. But it was a series of paintings and they were all very abstract. Most of them are quite abstract. And she had written a big book to go with it. And we spoke about it. And I told her, you know, I kind of get really stuck with the books and doing it right and all that kind of thing. And she wrote in the book, I give you the permission to do what the hell you like with this.
Yeah,
you know,
that's amazing.
I just needed that to be unlocked, because you kind of think, oh my God, well, she did all of this work here and I've got to kind of honor that by doing it as she does it. And she was like, don't worry about the book, get rid of the book, you know, just do what you like with it. And once I had that permission and I'd given that to myself, it just unlocked something.
Yeah,
it really does.
So therefore, that's what I see in that.
I say that all the time. I watched Dawn Michelle do some stuff with her journals. Okay.
Yeah.
And she had this really nice, I'll never forget it. She had this really nice journal and she was like, but you know what? I want to do this, that, and the other. And she just tore it apart.
I remember
Brand
that.
new journal. She ripped the sides. She pulled everything out. She gutted it. And I'm like, oh, you can totally do that. Like, you can do that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, no shit, man. Like, give yourself the permission to do that. And I love that the creator put that in the book because, yeah.
I was actually going to say,
yeah.
we've all created decks, and I would be so curious because to hear what you two think. But I feel like the greatest compliment of something you've created is if somebody can personalize it and make it theirs and like really own it. Like, how do you guys feel about that as deck creators?
Oh my God, I'm going to jump in right away because I have had that happen where I have seen somebody being like, and look at this. Like they had, I don't remember what card it was, but it was one card from Mystic Masters. And this was ages and ages ago when I first released it. And they were like, look how this ties together. And I'm like, I didn't even fucking see that. I didn't even see that.
Yeah.
I'm a genius. No, you know, I love that. Because it's like you have also taken what I've presented and just ran with it. And I love it. I love it. What about you, Stephen?
Yeah.
Well, what you just said there, I remember somebody saying to me, I love how those cups in the Two of Cups in Spirit Within make two faces. And I was like, what two faces? But, you know, that's great. But I mean, like this deck, this is one I created, but which I've been using a lot more lately. The
yeah.
And I wrote a pretty sturdy book on a system you can use with this, which I put it together because I wanted it to be watertight. I didn't want people to, which is kind of goes against us, I guess what we're saying, but I wanted people to be able to look at combination of cards and not be in any doubt as to what they meant. So
yeah,
I created the system, but I also made sure when I put that deck together that anyone could pick it up out of the box if the book wasn't even there and do a good enough reading. And I'm so happy if they do.
Yeah.
If anyone's watching it and you have the inner eye and you want to do that, you have my permission.
Yes.
Like with it.
Yeah, that's kind of the segue. It's like, I think creators would be like, I don't know, offended if we didn't read it the way that they envisioned. And to me, that's like the biggest compliment. If you can take it and make it yours and read it or see things in it that I can't see, like, yes, please do that. That means that we've made a useful tool, is I think the thing.
Yes.
And I think I would be bummed if I felt like people could never, you know, go off in their own direction with it. And it's one of the fears, I think, when you create something is like, is this too specific? Is this too much me where it's not gonna like be expandable? So I want it to be expandable, and getting that kind of, I think we need to flip the script and remind ourselves that I feel like it's pretty safe to say that a lot of creators would feel similarly, that they would want their product, their deck that they've created to be useful in whatever way it can be useful.
I would rather it be used than sitting on the shelf.
Yes. And that's the thing that I think we forget is like, while they're works of art and there's so much time and energy, they are tools.
Yeah.
No one can tell you you're using your drill wrong if it's working for you.
Yeah, that's right.
You know what I'm saying? Like you can use a screwdriver to open up a paint can.
Yep.
It's not a paint opener, but it works as that when I use it as that. So good for me because I found a way to open this paint can. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like, it's a tool. It shouldn't matter how you use that tool as long as you're not hurting anybody else, because it can also turn into... So a screwdriver can be all kinds of stuff, right?
It just goes right to dark with it. Just right to dark.
Into the dark place. Listen,
I love the metaphors that are flying around here.
Dani and I are very metaphor heavy people.
We are. We're going to relate it.
Yeah. Let's talk about maybe, I know, Stephen, you brought a couple, but some favorite decks that you like to work with or that help you to kind of open up more intuitively. Obviously, your mind's eye sounds like it does a really good job. But I mean, what else did you bring?
Yeah, and I think this is something I think you learn when you've been doing this some time. I think you get a bit of an idea of what works and what doesn't work for you.
Yeah.
And I think as I've moved on, I quite like more simplistic stuff. I don't like things that are too involved. I find sometimes everything that we're saying here, you know, about intuition, sometimes I kind of feel that I like things to be a little bit more focused, because, you know, even in this deck that I created here, you know, if you want to take the planning card and the work card, then you just kind of add those two cards together, and then we have a whole new kind of story. So I need sometimes a little bit of an anchor. So I do cards that do that. This one I really have enjoyed.
Oh, ask
So
your guides. I don't think I've seen that.
It's similar in the sense that it's got, you know, when I look at oracles, to be honest with you, it's lovely if they've got great imagery, but what I always really look at is the titles. Are the titles and the words something I can work with? Because if they're not, a lot of the time the images are kind of almost secondary, and they don't do so much. So you've kind of got, I think that one says deceit. Is that deceit? But you know, you can kind of, what I like about these is these sort of cards really, you know, they've got kind of words, and you can use your intuition to just bond them together. Once again, that, you know, we're not talking about, you could use this in isolation, but deceit and forgiveness, you know, there's a story evolving there.
Yes.
So, I really like the decks. The other one I really have liked, which I was kind of surprised by, was the Urban Crow.
I wouldn't have seen that coming. That's amazing.
I love this deck for that reason, because it's just really well thought out. You know,
I love that deck though,
and it's got such a vibe to it. I've got the Marseille here, or a Marseille, but this I mean, in terms of intuitive reading, I pulled this one out recently, and this is the Gift of Life Tarot. So I've got my wrong glasses on, that's why.
I have seen that.
But the images themselves are so evocative that they kind of set, I mean, look at that for a High Priestess card.
Dang.
Oh my gosh, that is gorgeous.
Yeah,
I mean, you kind of almost don't need to know what the High Priestess means to get a feeling from that card.
Yeah.
9 of Water.
Oh my god,
I love that.
that is a great 9 of Water. Wow. Oh man, I love that.
I can just kind of, you know, I can just look at a face and get
just a thousand things from that.
Yeah.
You know, you're picking up on the emotions of real people, because these pictures, I guess they're staged, some of them, but a lot of them are not. I mean, look at that for the.
Oh,
that's so beautiful.
So, kind of, I think you kind of pick different kinds of cards for different kinds of readings, don't you? And if you want to sit down with somebody and have an hour of real soul searching, then, you know, you'll pick that one up. And then if you've got somebody who wants a very specific answer, then you pick something up which gives you a really, you know, a real defined,
pinpoint, precise.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's the first deck for me that opened it up was my soul cards 1 and 2, because there's nothing. You don't even have a starting point. There's no words. There's just images. And this one I started reading way back in the day. Like this was another part of it for me, I think, was I'm very like logical. And even though I have this like kind of intuitive way now, like when I first started tarot, I was like, I can't do that. And so I kept testing myself. That's why I threw the book away of my first deck. That's why I picked these up. Because I'm like, well, I can't. I have to. There's nothing to go off of. I have to use my intuition. And this remains probably one of my most powerful decks for that purpose. And it's still the one that I use for the most intense things where I really need to get out of my own way and just read. And then I really love this one. The what is this called? I always forget. Luminous Void.
Luminous Void. Yeah.
I think this one is really strange, but its strangeness gets me out of my head. And sometimes I need that. Like if I'm trying to read intuitively, I need to get away from anything too concrete. I need it to be more fluid. I need it to be more organic somehow, and to help me like get out of something, to slow me down from going right to that rote place. And I find that getting decks that just sort of like make me scratch my head a little bit are sort of helpful for that. they slow me down so that I don't.
I like an abstract deck for stuff like that. Like I will go specifically to the Marguerite Peterson.
I was just gonna say, yep.
Yeah, very specifically, I will go to that because I'm like, oh, I need to get all the mumbo jumbo out of my head and feel my way through this.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. I find the minors in that deck actually probably more successful for me than the majors because I think there's something a bit more fluid about them.
They are more fluid in the minors. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
I mean, have you ever sat down with a tarot friend and they brought a deck and you've never seen it before and they lay out the cards and you've got no understanding of what's going on in these things and you can give the most perfect reading.
Yep.
When you're completely just caught on the fly like that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's quite expensive to have a different deck every time you did a reading. You know, if it's one you've never seen before, but I think if you can kind of approach cards sometimes in that kind of playful, open way where you kind of almost imagine it is the first time that you've ever seen those things before, some beautiful stuff can happen.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think one of my favorite parts about getting a new deck is that first spread.
Yes.
Yes. It's that first spread.
Yeah. I think it's why I like doing, you mentioned this also earlier, Dani, that getting your impressions before you dive into the book. I think that's why I love doing like walkthroughs as I do. I always do them as like a first impression style. And because I've got the camera on, I'm slowing down to really look at the images and talk through my impressions. It's like a really great bonding exercise because I sort of develop my own understanding of every card before I do my own study and my own, like, before it starts speaking to me in a more like concrete way. I have this like first way to just sort of dive in and explore before I've got something kind of locking me down. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Also, I think the other thing as well is, I mean, especially with Marseille, it's like going spreadless.
Yeah.
You know,
yes.
You know,
Yeah.
even need to have a spread. You know, spreads sometimes can constrict the. Sometimes it can affect intuition, I think, because it kind of gives it something to grow from. But I think there are other times when you can just read the cards as they fall.
Yeah.
I might think in my head as I'm laying the cards, okay, I'm going to put one here because this is kind of what's important. And then I'm going to just put a card right up here because this is really far away. So, you know, what is this that maybe is not developed yet or is on the horizon? And I'm going to put one here tucked up against the first card because that's what's supporting me, you know, and it's all very open. It's very fluid. It's kind of, I'm just laying these cards as I feel. And I'm kind of almost reading the patterns as much as I'm reading the actual cards.
Yes.
Like casting almost.
I do the same thing. Like when, of course I have my spreads, you can, you know, I'll read for somebody with a spread, but my favorite is just like open, like read for me. Boom. Let's go.
Yeah.
I will lay out. And like you said, it's like, it's so funny how it's like, these feel all drawn to one side. This must be something in the future because it feels pulled there. Like that is one of my favorite ways to read. No spread.
Yeah. Yeah. I like laying out like just a grouping of cards, and I'll typically lay them out in like an organized way, I guess you could say. So I'll typically do, if it's 8 cards, I'll probably do 4 rows or 2 rows of 4 or that kind of thing. But then it just sort of becomes a spread as you read, because you're like, okay, this card's out, this must be more conscious stuff, or these two are pairing here. And it gives you, at least for me, if I lay cards out in like a grid with no predefined idea of what everything's going to mean, the spread kind of happens as you're reading. Like the relationship between cards becomes clear as you're reading. For me, that actually does, I completely agree about, it opens things up. Sometimes I get, I don't know if you've ever had this happen, Dani, and in fact, I'm probably going to be revamping how I do readings because of this, but I would have a specific spread, like, okay, I'll do this relationships reading for you, and it's this specific spread. And then somebody will book it, and every once in a while, I just get this feeling like, that's not right.
It's not right. Yes.
Right. And then I feel like,
I will go completely rogue at that point. Like,
okay,
I will.
So
I'll be like, listen, I know this is what you came here for, but we're not reading it like that.
Yeah, this is what we're doing. I have a hard time with that. And I think I need to actually, the most fun I have as a reader is when there's no spread, or when it's the Celtic Cross, probably because that's something I know so well that I can flow with it and it doesn't feel like it boxes me in as much. But my favorite is just somebody's just booked a custom 6-card reading and I'm like, let's go. I love that. And I think so. I just need to change up how I'm doing it, because as much as I value a good spread, a spread for me is almost like Well, it's the same as say reading Lenormand, and you've got like a house, and you can't read those things separate. They become intertwined. So now if this card is in the past position, I don't know how to unbox myself from that as being in the past. I don't know how to say, well, actually, this isn't the past. I'm too literal for that, I think. And it does chain me down when I'm looking at these cards. And now I can't look at them another way. Like I feel like there's a barrier there. So yeah, when you just lay cards on the table, you give yourself the freedom. You can still group them. Like when I read with my soul cards, I don't have a set number of cards. I don't have any positions. I lay them out and then I literally start rearranging them and grouping them together to form stories. And that's how I read. And I give myself permission to do that because it's that deck and it's that type of reading. But imagine if we did that with everything. Imagine if you laid down like 10 cards and you gave yourself permission to reorder them.
I have done it.
Oh, I love that.
Yes. Oh, I have done it. I have laid out cards and I'm like, I don't know why this is over here. I'm pulling this over here because this belongs over here. Immediately, I will move it. Like now, again, this has come over time where I used to like be really strict. And like I said, like we hit walls and, you know, I would like to, I'm interested to hear how you guys deal with that as well when I'm done saying this. But like, there are some times where you hit a wall and you're like, this is talking about past influences. This has nothing to do with that. This doesn't feel like it has anything to do with that, but it's in that way. How do I even tie this together? And it's like, I feel the need to try to tie it. And it's like, this is only blocking me in, you know? And so you hit that wall and like, it's taken me a while to be like, I know this is what it says, but this is not what it's about. So we're just going to talk about what it's about because apparently that's not important. But it took me a long time to do that. You know, I would hit that wall and I'd be like, this is what I'm seeing. This is, you know, I can tie it in like this. But you know, put that in your back pocket, you know, like, but really giving ourselves permission, especially when things like that will cause you to hit a wall or like, you know, like people say, like, get in your own way. How do you guys overcome that? Or how have you overcome that in the past? Have you ever had that moment where you're in a reading and you just hit this wall and you're like, we're gonna come back to this, you know?
Or kind of like you kind of almost just have to take it right back down to basics, you know? I mean, I think a lot of the things we've been talking about today is often around fear, you know, fear of not getting it right, fear of not doing what the creator said we should do with it, fear of not doing what this reader here does with it, you know, therefore if I don't do it that way, maybe I'm doing it wrong. And I think sometimes, you know, intuition is about breaking the rules and just letting your own personal sat nav tell you where to go, you know. And you know, and I would love more people to do that and not feel worried that they are not doing things in the right way.
Same. Yeah, same. I think we have better readers when we're less worried about getting it right or wrong, like in general.
It's so true.
I put a thing up. I did a presentation in London and I put a big screen up because I showed people how to use tarot with pretty much just the minor arcana. So I told everybody, you know, put your majors away because they're not going to be relevant for this. And you can see people kind of, you know,
get a little stressed out.
Why am I not using this? I need to use it. And I put a screen up that said, you know, I've been doing this for a long time. The tarot gods did not strike me down. No one died. It's
you can do this.
Well, just like with majors only, like some people, like there are even times when I'm like, you need them. You don't.
Haven't yet. I've never figured it out. Like,
my grandparents that read cards, they read playing cards and stuff, and they removed cards out of the deck. Nope, you take these out, you read with these. You know, we don't give ourselves, again, it's like, it's that permission. I love that. I love that you put that up there. Like the tarot gods have not come and, you know, destroyed me yet.
I love it.
I mean, I think also you can look at another reader and think, well, that's not how I would do it. And maybe that's not something I agree with. But I think we kind of need to allow people to do what they want to do as well. I mean, I remember reading certain famous tarot oracle personalities over the years who would take out the death card and that kind of stuff. Do I agree with that? No, not really. I think that those things need to be there. But on the other hand, if that works for you, you do that. You know, if it works that you're working with, as long as people know what you're doing.
That's, I think, the thing.
I think that's the biggest thing.
Yeah.
It's fine, but I think people need to know what you're doing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think we do need to be transparent. Like especially if you specifically don't read with certain cards, or, that could, because that would be a deal breaker for me. If I went to someone as a reading, I need to know, do you take quote unquote bad cards out? Because I need to know that, because I don't want a reading that does not include the whole concept, right?
Yeah.
But
or if you do have that reading which doesn't include all of those, I want to know that those cards aren't there.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like I just want to know.
Yeah.
Like what's happening, as I think but that only matters to me as a reader.
Yeah.
If I came to this and I didn't know, what that means, like, I guess it really wouldn't matter.
Yeah.
And like I said, that's why I do agree. We can let people do whatever they want to do. I just think, like, just own it, I guess, is like
That's
the main thing
too. It's
I
kind of
think
like
it's fine as long as you own it. Some people read for others by strictly reading out of a book.
Yeah.
That's fine. You do you, but like, just own what you're doing. Yeah, like, just own it.
That's how I feel too. Like, I feel like it's kind of like informed consent, right? Tell people what you're doing, especially if they're coming to you with an expectation of what kind of experience they're going to have. And then that way you've clarified what, people do come in with preconceived ideas. People come to sit at a table and they expect you to have a Rider-Waite Smith. And when you don't, they might be a little surprised, right? So like, there's things like that. But, you were talking earlier about what happens when you hit a wall. And I think the struggle is sometimes recognizing that sometimes a card's not speaking, like, at all. And so sometimes I think I'll, like, just accept, okay, it's just not speaking. That's fine. We're going to move on. We're going to focus on other things. Or is it relevant to the message? If I'm getting the message, then it might not matter. But then sometimes I feel like a card is like shouting and it's speaking another language. And I'm like, I know you have something to say. What is it? And those are the times when I might pull out, either pull additional cards around it to get context, or I might literally pull a different system, like throw a couple runes down, or grab an oracle deck, or grab a Lenormand or something to sort of like shake it loose. Because it's just like, sometimes you just feel like it's just not giving it up. Like, dude, give it up. I need your message. Come on now. But it's scary when that happens as a reader, especially if you're reading for somebody else, and especially if you're reading for somebody else, like in person, professionally, and that happens. You're like, like Steven said, it's all about fear. And when we give ourselves permission to not let that stop us, what we do just shifts and changes.
Do you know, one of the things that I think is really underrated in tarot reading or any kind of reading is moments of space in a reading, moments of quiet in a reading. If you get a card, I think it's difficult if you're reading for other people, because they're paying you by the minute most likely, and there's an expectation that you're going to be talking for all of that time and giving them information. But I think sometimes just stopping for a moment and putting your hand on that card and saying, what do I feel? Let's just take away blockages in the mind of how this relates to this. What do I actually feel? And just taking a moment and telling somebody, we're just going to take a moment to see, just to choose with this card for a moment. And then pulling that feeling and translating it some way, And sometimes those responses might be a little bit clunky, but I think that we kind of do a disservice to the people we're reading for and think that we have to give them all this stuff. It's like, sometimes we don't need to. Maybe we can just translate a few words or feelings, and that's going to be just as important and vital to them in that moment as if we roll off all of this stuff. I think there's always this feeling that you've got to keep going all the time and just talking and talking and talking, but space and a little bit of silence is just such a beautiful and important thing, I think.
And I used to be, I'm not gonna lie, like, I used to feel like that, like, oh, I have to fill this space. And like, you're absolutely right. I feel like, especially when you're in the beginnings, like when you're learning and when you're reading for somebody, it's like, oh, they're gonna think I don't know what I'm talking about. Again, there's all this fear around silence and whatever, but I think there's something so powerful and like we need to sit with this. Cause like I'll do that in a reading where I'm like, listen, I feel like I have 12 people talking to me at once. Let's take a breath with this.
Yeah.
Really see where it's sitting, because I feel like I'm getting lost in this energy. Like there's just either there's nothing, there's silence, and I need to understand why there's silence here, or it sounds like an orchestra on top of a military base, you know, like I have to quiet this down. We need to sit with this and, you know, why is this such a big feeling? Or like you said, Stephen, like putting your hand all over that card and what am I feeling right now? What is this really saying with everything? I think holding that silence and just being okay with that. It's really all about, I feel like, intuitive reading. And I feel like we've had a through line throughout this whole thing is really just about allowing yourself to read these cards without someone, like imagining someone watching over you and saying, you're wrong, you can't do that. Like it really is sitting with what we're doing and just allowing ourselves to take the time, the energy, and the space to take in what this creator, what this system, what you have to bring to this reading.
It's kind of funny because actually I used to charge, like when I was doing my client readings, I used to do a time-based system. Like this will be a 30-minute reading or whatever. I actually stopped doing that because I found that I wasn't giving myself that opportunity to have the space. And when I switched, I noticed that something happened, and it happens in every single reading. I always, like as part of my like talking through the beginning of the reading, I said, I'm going to lay the cards down. After I lay them down, we're going to have a little bit of quiet for a minute while I just take it in, get a feeling for what the cards are saying. And then I'll start talking. And then I'll also warn them when I start talking, and anybody who watches anything I do knows this, I'm going to it's going to be a lot and it's going to be fast. So pause me if you need to pause me,
and slow down.
I have two modes when I'm reading. I'm either on and I'm like going, or I'm completely silent. And the funny thing is that once I started giving myself permission to have that be literally a part of my practice, part of my routine when I read for others, it's so freeing because I've told them this is going to happen. I'm going to be quiet and I'll be on camera, whatever. I'll be sipping a drink. I'll take it in and then I'll get, okay. And then I'll like start talking through what has come through. And it's actually completely empowered me in reading to be comfortable in the silence, which is not something that is a default mode for me at all. But it's important because I think we get so much out of those pauses to just, okay, wait, what is this actually saying? And almost every single time I lay cards down, initially, it's nothing. I'm like, it's just pictures. That silence allows me to go into it, you know? Yeah. It's powerful. It's really important.
Yeah. I think you can miss a lot when I think the client can miss a lot, that we can miss a lot when we feel that we have to go straight and, you kind of got to hit the ground running with the reading straight away. And I think that you're always trying to find that one thing that's relevant for the person as well. And sometimes I think some of the interesting readings over the years have been where the most confusing card in the deck, in the reading rather, has been the most important one, because it's telling you something that you don't know.
Yes.
We kind of look at it and we can kind of say, I get that. That's about my boyfriend. I get that. That's about my job. And it's like, what does this one mean? Well, rather than passing it over, maybe this is the card that has the real message. This is the one to understand. And we need to just take a minute or so to just really feel that, what is this card trying to tell me? And it might not give you the message straight away. Maybe this is something you need to go home with as a client and sit on and think about. And you must have both had it where someone goes away and then they text you about a week later, go, you're never going to believe this. And you're like, oh, I would.
I definitely do. Because I always say, I don't remember where I was talking about this or maybe, I don't know why I feel like it was with you, Lisa. We might have been on Hot Takes or something. I don't know. Yeah. But it's like one of those situations where it's like, oh, I remember. Anyway, it was another video. But I'm like, I'll have those moments where like I'm getting this message and I'm like, I personally, especially if I'm doing something remote where I don't have that person in front of me, I'll just be straight honest. I'll be like, I don't know where this is going, because this feels like it's totally out of context to me. But I'm just going to tell you
Yes.
This is what I'm getting from this card. And I'm famous for saying, like, put this in your pocket, you know, put this in your back pocket. At least for me, I don't understand where this is, but it's important enough of a message that we're just going to go off script. Yeah. And I am going to tell you that this is what this means in this context for me. This is what I'm getting.
Yep.
Do with it what you will.
Have you found as well that those cards, those confusing,
those are the most profound.
They're the ones that have the most significant effect on people in readings.
Yep,
they really do, because that's where I feel like this reading is not for me. It really validates that for me. Like, this is not for me or from me. This is for you.
Yes,
because it means jack shit to me.
Some of the coolest readings have been when I've literally said, and I always give myself permission, like, hey, I could be wrong. This is what's coming through. This is what I'm saying or seeing or whatever. Some of the most powerful experiences I've had as a reader and some of the most profound feedback I've gotten from people has been when I've let myself say the like really wild, crazy thing. Like, I'm looking at a card or even, and a song pops into my head and I say, for some reason, this feels super significant. Or I'll get a mental image of something and it just sounds like, it's like you said, it's like way out of left field. And I'll be like, this feels important. So I'm going to say it. It's going to maybe sound strange, but just here it is. And I'll just, now I know every time that happens, I need to say it no matter how weird I think it sounds, because I have so many times had it validated that later that person will come back and go, oh my God, I'm glad you said that because this is how it played out for me, or this is what it meant to me. And it ended up being, some of these things are the craziest, most unexplainable tarot experiences I've had, where you're like, there's no way this isn't real. Because look at this experience I had and look at this feedback. And I said this weird thing about a bicycle on your neighbor's street or whatever. And then like we find out this is a thing. It's always, so now it's like, if it pops into my head, and especially if it makes me a little uncomfortable, boom, I get it out there and I get it into the reading because...
It's difficult sometimes though, I think, when you're reading for other people, especially if it's something sensitive.
Yes.
And
yes.
I remember reading for a lady and she, I think she was a little bit late and she sat down and she said something along the lines, sorry, I'm a little bit late. My husband dropped me off. It's our anniversary. We're going to go and have something to eat afterwards. So I thought, okay, whatever. And we were looking at the cards and I looked at, I think it was a Knight of Wands, quite likely. And I was looking at it and I was just thinking, something else is going on here. Somebody else is going on here. But you're armed with this woman sitting here. We're having a wonderful anniversary, and you think, this is maybe not something I can broach with this person because I'm so obviously wrong. But you've got that feeling inside, haven't you?
Yeah.
Really nudging at you. And I said to her, like, this might be right out there, and I apologize if I'm speaking out of turn, but I really get the feeling that there's somebody else in your life, a younger man, because there's all this fire energy. And is there anything like that going on? And it turned out that regardless of the anniversary dinner and all this of it, there was a young man at work who she'd had a little bit of a spark with, and he was kind of insinuating, well, maybe we could go to a hotel or something. And she was thinking, well, maybe I wouldn't mind doing that, because what you see on the outside of somebody is not always going to be the full story. You can't just assume that old lady across the road is getting less sex than you are. You can't assume assumptions that the person in these kind of clothes or that says this or that is not having trouble with money, So you just can't say what's in your gut sometimes.
I think you brought up something really important though, because you said, being sensitive to how you approach these things when you could be treading into really uncomfortable or scary territory for the person you're reading for. I think that's a huge piece, because the delivery makes such a difference, and being willing to say, look, I could be completely wrong here. And like, I say that so much in readings. Hey, I could be wrong. This is what I'm getting. But like, please trust yourself. Like, I say this to my clients all the time, like, trust yourself always more than you trust anybody else. Like, yourself best, but like, here's what I'm getting. And like, here's something to think about. And I think when you do that, you can take that initial gut punch out of a message, because people think that you're telling them what's happening, where it's going, what's going to happen. And that can immediately trigger fear in your client. But if you tell them up front, look, I'm no expert. I'm just saying what what I see, and like it might not be relevant right now, maybe it'll be relevant in the future, but this is just something that comes up. Suddenly you give them permission to explore the idea you're presenting, because you're not hitting them right out the gate with like, I'm the expert and this is what's happening, and then they're going to get their defenses and their walls up. Instead you're like, hey, look, like this is just, maybe this is irrelevant, but.
And you know, I always, especially like, I've talked about this before.
Yeah.
But like, I always feel, I'm like, the readers who read for people in public, I'm like, you're so brave. Like, I always, like, the way that I read, I always ask someone, if there are other people present, I always say, are you comfortable with whatever comes out in this reading amongst these people?
Yep.
Because of things like that. But I think that you really hit the nail on the head, and I think there's a lot of fear with a lot of people around that, where they're just like, I'm just not going to say. But I feel like sometimes it's like, we do have those moments as readers where it's like, I don't know if I'm willing to say this right now, or willing to go there. And I think in those moments, what you did was really important, where you were like, listen, I'm not saying that this, I hope I don't overstep a boundary. And if this feels completely wrong, please.
Yeah.
Either ignore it or talk to me about this energy. But this is what I'm feeling. I love that you know, I love when, you know, as readers and in that situation, you gave yourself permission to say that, because I think those things are relative. And I think that sometimes the person who's coming to you have these things that are being presented to them, and they feel caught and judged, or that they will be judged. And having that moment where it's like, listen, I'm not here to judge you. I'm not here to, but this is what I'm feeling.
Yeah.
Can we talk about this? And if not, that's completely okay. Just know that there is this energy in, you know, around you. Do with it what you will.
Yeah, for sure.
And there's so many ways that you can approach these things. You could pull out that Knight of Wands and say, do you know what? I've got this card here. It feels just that little bit in conflict to everything else that's going on here. You know, everything else kind of seems like this, and this seems like this, and this is kind of what the card represents, and this is the kind of person that I feel it represents. Can you think of anybody in your life that this could relate to?
Yes, and you leave it open to them.
Whack them around the head with it and say, I think you're having an affair.
I think you
The ways that you can do it, you know, where you can kind of coax that out. And as you say, if someone doesn't feel ready to speak about that or be open about it, that's fine. And they might wander away from there, and they've still gained some kind of insight or inspiration from that reading without having to talk about it.
Can I ask, have y'all ever, like, I have certain people, like, especially when, like, I'll read for, like, one of my family members, like, I'll be a straight turd about it, and I'll be like, you want to tell me who the hell this is? Okay. You want to tell me what this is? Because why do I feel like I'll totally be a turd? But I feel like there's always a time and a place, and it always depends on who you're reading for and what kind of energy it is. And it's like, with her, there's always a freedom of like, I know that no matter what I'm throwing at her, like, we're in this space together, and she's going to laugh about it. Or she's going to be like, well, let me tell you what happened. I'm like, you know, like, it's just, there are times and places where I feel like, and certain people where I feel like you can really let your guard down. And I love those readings. I feel the most free.
Yeah.
When I'm reading for someone that I know and I trust, and they trust me, and we can just be open and honest.
Yeah.
Those are my favorite readings.
Yeah.
Do y'all have some of those favorite readings?
Yeah.
Huh?
When you can be totally unfiltered.
Totally unfiltered.
Yeah.
There's just so many great titles for books here. You know.
I know, right?
Steven's mind is like,
give you permission to use it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think, but you know, once again, in terms of that, I think all of these things, I do also believe that a little bit of groundwork is important too. You know, go rogue with your decks and do what you like with them. But I do also believe that it's important to have a little bit of understanding of what's going on in those cards.
I agree.
I also believe that, you know, in terms of reading for people like that woman that I was speaking about, I think that you maybe need a little bit of time and experience of reading for people. And, you know, you don't even have to do that always as a tarot reader. You know, you can just spend time with people, talk to people, listen to people, understand different kinds of people.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you have to kind of be sensitive, and I think a little bit of experience helps with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of reading is also reading the person across the table from you and like picking up on where they're at. Like sometimes you'll have like when I've read in like more quick fire, like public readings, like tarot and tea events or whatever, you can have somebody sit across from you and you just know they're terrified, or you know they're having a rough day and they need comfort in that moment. And when you can really get a feel for how to pick up on other people's energy, if you're reading distance reading, sometimes it's the way the question is phrased. I'll actually address that sometimes before I even get into the cards. Hey, I noticed in the way that you worded this question, this is a few things that jumped out at me. Let's talk about those things first, and then let's get into the cards, because
that's how I choose a deck. I will, if I'm remote, I will reread. I will read over and over what they wrote to me, and I'm like, where are they right now?
Yes. Because I think a lot of that experience is like, you're not just, I think it's an oversimplification to think that we're only reading the cards. I think that 99% of the time we're reading the cards, we're reading the energy, and we're reading the person. And that piece sometimes gets overlooked, but how you deliver a message will change depending on who you're talking to. Like Dani said, there's friends that, you know, you can just be really punchy and blunt with it. And then there's going to be people who, you know, you need to be very, very gentle and very cautious with.
Yeah.
Yes.
And there's people who you know that if you say the wrong thing, you could send them into a tailspin.
That's
and so knowing that is a huge part of, I think, what is important as a reader. And it does come, like Stephen said, with practice and like exploring and like getting used to being in front of different types of people, knowing the person who's just there who's already got their walls up before you've even started speaking versus the person that's throwing their whole heart on the table for you. And like knowing those differences is huge. Yeah.
And also I think, you know, people come to you for different things. I remember, this is another one of those readings that really stands out for me. Years ago, I used to do like the fairs, and sometimes, you know, you would read for about, I don't know, 8 or so people in a day. And I remember one fair I went to, I had I don't know, probably about 3 at the start of it, and then in the afternoon it kind of tailed off a little bit, and not many people were coming. And I was thinking, you know, do I finish up now and go?
Yeah, I'm done.
And I didn't. I kind of intuitively decided to stay for a little bit longer.
Yeah.
This older lady came along, an elderly lady, and she said, are you free? And it was like, yeah, sure. And we went through the cards, and they didn't really seem to resonate with her. You know, it just didn't seem to make much difference. And then we got to this one card, just this one card, and it was a king. I can't remember what king it was. And I said to her, this card feels like it's important. And I described the king. That's all I did, is I described the king and what I felt about that king. And she said, I came here today because my husband had passed. And I just wanted a sign that he was still around. And she said, and you just described him. It's making me kind of almost emotional.
Oh my God, like literally I was about to say, I'm about to cry right now. Oh my
God. And I didn't know that was what I was doing. I just knew that there was something in this king. I described him. She said, you described him perfectly. She said, that's what I came for. That's what I needed. So, you know, all those other 9 cards in the Celtic Cross spread about you might do this, you might do that. Is there any opportunities? They didn't mean anything to her.
It didn't mean anything.
It's not what she needed. I mean, she didn't tell me that's what she wanted.
Right.
But
there it was.
It was there. And,
you know, it was what she needed when she needed it.
That one card.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've had readings that impacted me like that. You know, matter of fact, I get a lot of my readings from Lisa because I trust her.
Oh.
And it's like when those cards, like I'm getting teary right now. Like as a client, not only as a reader, but as a client, sometimes those cards pop up and you're like, oh, fuck.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is what I needed. I didn't know I needed it. Or maybe I came in and I was really looking for that. And it just comes up and you're like, I don't give a shit about anything else. This is what I needed.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is the beauty of what we do.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that, you know?
She'd had a hello from her husband, and that, you know what I mean? I always say, you know, when somebody walks away from the table looking better than when they sat down, you've done your job.
You've done it.
Yeah. It's, I had a client once who came in and she sat across from me, and I don't think she gave a shit what the card said. She didn't care. She needed to talk. And like, sometimes that's it too, right? Sometimes you're there to just listen and to just give a platform where they can be heard. And I don't even remember the cards because I don't think it mattered in that reading. She needed to have somebody just give her their undivided attention and hear her. And she was one of those people, like, if you're reading at a shop, sometimes they'll book a time, right? And so you're talking to them during that time, and she's like, hold on. And she went and booked more time because she just wanted to be there and to just talk and be heard. And I think sometimes we forget that what we're doing as readers is not just interpreting the cards, but we are offering a presence and a focus and an attention that a lot of people don't get in their day-to-day lives. And that is super powerful too.
And I consider what I do, you know, maybe not a lot of people do that, but I do consider what we do a service, which is why I'm not one that will, I say, quote unquote, solicit. Like, I say I offer, you know, I will say I offer tarot readings, but I'm never going to ask someone. I'm never going to go up to someone and be like, let me give you a reading. Let me give you a reading. I'm never going to do that because I feel like, just for me personally, I'm not saying people who do that is wrong. And when you're learning, I think it's important to ask because you're trying to connect. It's a little bit different, but like, I feel like it's so important to have space to do what we do.
Yeah.
You know, some people are like, this is bullshit and this is whatever, but the human connection.
Yeah, it's huge.
Just sitting with another human and talking about life and saying, I hear you. I see you.
Yeah.
I got you. Yeah. In whatever way, shape, or form that I can, even if it's just to hold this space and give you that one piece of information or to sit here and listen to you and say, it's okay, I hear you, is so important. Yeah. And I think, like you said, Lisa, thinking that we're just here regurgitating information, we're just reading cards, it's so much more than that. And I think giving ourselves permission and following that intuition and really just doing the service for the person in front of you or for yourself. Cards is so important to really understand and to really look at sometimes. Like, look past all the shiny, all the social media and what we're doing. Like,
the rules, you know, all
like,
of it.
Everything for show. It's like, at the end of the day, I'm in love with what I do.
Yeah.
And I do take it seriously.
Yeah.
When it needs to be. And I just really love that, you know?
Yeah.
And I feel like this talk and these things that we brought up are just so important to hear sometimes because we don't hear it often enough.
Agree. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I have to say, you know, I mean, I was the person that brought up the word regurgitating, and I think probably it sounds like a kind of a crass way of putting it. But what I kind of meant was, it's sometimes seems that you kind of go through this kind of formula with card reading.
Yeah.
You have the moon, and the moon means this. When it's here, it means that. Blah blah. You know, and I'm not saying that is not an effective way of reading because it is.
Not at all.
I think sometimes it's helpful to us and to the people we're reading for to just put that to one side sometimes and say, well, let's just try another approach. Let's just kind of see if we can tune into it in a completely different kind of way. Let's look at a part of this card that maybe, or look at it in a different way than we've ever looked at it before. Because, you know, I could have 10 people, I could speak to 10 people and they could all tell me what Lisa is like. But it wouldn't be the same as me sitting down and talking to Lisa.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely.
You know, all of those responses are valid. They've had their own experiences, but I need to do that myself.
Yes.
So kind of put those accounts or those book meanings away just for a little bit and kind of, what's Lisa like to me? You know, how does Lisa appear to me today, because
Today.
they're different to me on different days.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
about cards is that they don't always have to mean exactly the same thing. When
That's
they're
true.
in different environments, they're touching different cards, or they're
Yeah.
answering a completely different question. You
Yeah.
see something else.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
I think without this, tarot wouldn't be as magical. If we didn't have the ability to experience it in different situations in different ways, where would the magic be? It would just be like reading the same book over and over again. Like at a certain point, it's going to lose its luster. And I think what keeps us enchanted by this as a practice and amazed by its power is that it shifts and changes and grows with us and with who we're reading for. Oh my gosh.
I turn my light on. I can see that I'm falling in.
Oh, I know. I was about to say we're at an hour 40. I'm like, we're losing time over there. We're losing time.
It is very late where Stephen is. Thank you so much for hanging out.
Oh no, it's not late
so
here.
Much.
It is coming up to rabbit dinner time, though, I have to say.
Yes. Yes.
I'm getting the signs.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Thank you so much for hanging out and talking with us, though. This has been so much fun. It has been absolutely enjoyable. Thank you for taking the time to come and chit chat and laugh around with us, you know?
I'm welcome. It's lovely to speak with you both.
Oh, thank you. This was so much fun.
Absolutely.
All right, those of you watching, make sure you tell us what you want us to cover in future Glitter and Gators. Yes. Make sure you drop it in the comments down below or in the chat or whatever is convenient. We'll take a note of that and start making a list. If you want us to
have Stephen's information down below as well.
Yes.
You know, go follow, read, enjoy his decks, do
and
all.
Stephen has been experimenting a little with some YouTubiness recently. There's been a couple.
Yes. I mean, I'll be completely honest. I've taken a little bit of a social media backseat at the moment. So if anyone goes to my Instagram or anything else, it's all looking a little bit kind of quiet over there. Yeah. And that's another thing I think with tarot reading. Sometimes it's good to take a little bit of time out and to reboot, to reassess, and think about, you know, where am I going with this? How is this evolving? You know, because I think we can do things the same way for a long time, and sometimes it can get a little bit stale, and you need to kind of shake it all up a little bit. And
absolutely
give it a mix.
Kind of phase. So I have my website, you know, there's stuff about me there, but for the moment my social media accounts are looking a little bit quiet, but they'll be shaken up again.
Awesome. Yeah, and his website is linked down below. It should be. If it's not, we'll make sure that it's there, but I'm pretty sure that I have that there as well. And then all of ours are going to be there as well. And then you'll be able to find this in our Glitter and Gators, because we flip-flop between Lisa and I's channel every month. So thank you guys for hanging out here, and we'll be over there again next month. And again, Stephen, thank you so much for hanging out with us. If you guys have any questions or anything, drop them down below, put some comments. We'll definitely make sure that they get to whoever they need to go to. So so thanks, you guys, and we will see you all very soon. I'm sending you all my love. Mwah. Bye. Later, Gators.
Bye.
I'm closing this.
Oh.
Boom.